protecting our community is worth a shot. Vaccines can help protect you, your family, and our community. Stop by James Drugstore today.
And welcome back to the Livingston Parish News Weekly Show, a podcast brought to you by the Livingston Parish News. This is our special edition every week. This is called Group Therapy. It's when we sit down and discuss what's going on in Livingston Parish with our two editors here. We have one on the right, one on the left. I was about to steal their thunder and introduce them without letting them introduce themselves. We do let them do that so that those who are just listening can put a voice to a name. So this week, we're going to start on my left. Go ahead.
Hey, this is Rob DeArmond. I'm sports editor here at the Livingston Parish News.
And this is David Gray, lifestyle editor with the news.
All right. So there we go. Glad I did not steal their thunder. So this week, plenty to talk about. We're going to be moving at a quick pace here. First and foremost, David, we're going to start with you because big event this past weekend.
Yes.
That managed to avoid the weather, except for I was actually right there right then when it started raining. It was everything was set to shut down at 4 o'clock. It rained right about 3:30, but otherwise a very good crowd at Fall Fest. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, like you said, I mean, if you look at a couple of the pictures we have from this weekend, you can see a bunch of people. Fall Fest was this weekend, like Spring Fest was last year, and everything else. It was canceled in 2020 because of the pandemic. So this year they were able to have Spring Fest, and the state was still technically under, reopening phases at that point. But now that most of the restrictions have been lifted, this was probably the biggest event within the downtown district area that there's been since the start of the pandemic. And typically Fall Fest and Spring Fest, the crowds, they start at 9 or 10, depending on, when they set that. And usually the crowds around lunchtime is when you really start to see a big crowd. This was packed from about 9 o'clock on. I mean, people were eager to get out there. I don't know if there was, if they were scared by the weather, they wanted to make sure that they, beat the rain. Like you said, it kind of started raining at the very end. I got there at a little after 10 thinking that I was going to beat the big rush, but no, there was parking was a headache. It took me a while to find a spot and to get over there, but I mean, that was, as the organizer said, that was a good problem for them to have because you had, vendors sold well, the businesses did well, there was thousands of people there throughout the day. So, I mean, it was a good return and a kickoff to Christmas in the Village, which they are fully intending on having this year. Unlike last year, like I said, that was canceled because of COVID. So they're fully intending on having that this year. And Fall Fest is really that sort of kickoff to Christmas in the Village when you have the lighting of Old City Hall, light of the Christmas tree, and nativity scene, the Denham Springs Parade. And they're also having that same day, they're doing something new. The Baton Rouge Orchestra is going to be playing a few hours after the parade on that Saturday. I forget what day it is. I think the 11th of December. So there's a lot of activity coming up in the Antique Village. Oh, and Chef's Evening. That's another one that don't want to leave them out. So a lot of activity coming up in the Antique Village this year. Much different than last year when it was pretty quiet.
Sure. COVID was tough that first year, and a lot of things missed. So we're going to come back to you to talk a little bit about some of the COVID stuff, but we're going to try to mix it up a little bit, try to bounce back and forth. We're going to shift over to Rob for a minute. Going to talk about two fall sports that we haven't really had a chance to dive into as much as we have football, and that's going to be volleyball and cross country. And let's kick it off with those folks who, for whatever reason, probably their physiology, like to get out there on Saturday morning and run. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in the world of cross country.
So I had a pretty good weekend for some girls here in the parish. At the latest race that they ran Saturday, had 3 finish in the top 20. It was Caden Boudreaux, who's having a great season. I think she finished 6th. Hannah Lombaugh from Denham Springs and Ava Patero, they all finished in the top 20. And Sylvia White from Live Oak was the top finisher for them on the girls' side there. So they're off and running Saturday mornings. Always, you can check social media feeds, Coach McLean, Coach Johnson. They're always posting stuff and making sure that their kids get some limelight out there.
Sure. Also in the fall, you can check out volleyball, which, had some up and down years locally here lately. But you did cover Springfield last night, who is usually pretty good, and they kind of flashed that skill last night, I guess you can say.
That was my first time seeing Springfield, and like I told Coach Abear, it's one of those things where you've got life is happening right now. Normally by this point I've seen everybody play at least once, but it was my first time to see Springfield. They played Independence, who's a kind of a newer program. They're trying to get things established. And Springfield they worked the serve game really well last night. A bunch of aces, and they're able to kind of they're able to sweep Independence really quickly. But that serve game was really on for them. They've got a big one coming up again Thursday. We're doing this on Wednesday morning. Tomorrow they'll be hosting St. Thomas in a big district match. They feel like they're kind of hitting their stride right now, which is a good time to be doing it.
Now, Doyle also has a new volleyball team, don't they?
Right. What they're doing is they basically and I'd done a story on this probably about a month and a half ago when they had their first couple of matches there. They're competing at the JV level. This is their first year, so these first 2 years are going to compete at the JV level. They have a JV A team and a JV B team, and so they're basically just it started as a couple of students are just playing volleyball in PE, and they said, hey, it might be cool if we can get this started as a sport at school. So they go and start talking to Coach Beatty, Tim Beatty, the athletic director, and Mr. Dawsey, the principal, and they said, okay, let's see what you can do. And it was really something that kind of started last year toward the end of school and kind of got legs and took off, and they had some tryouts during the summer, and here they are, and it's they picked up on it really well. I think if I'm not mistaken, they'll be hosting Walker tomorrow, and like I said, what they do it's two teams, JV A and B, and they're getting reps and they're learning the game.
Sure, and I think it's good, because you talked about Independence playing Springfield, and that's kind of tough to throw a second-year team up against. The Lady Bulldogs have perennially kind of been right there when it comes to volleyball.
Right.
That's a tough thing to do, but with Doyle, starting it off with JV, trying to get these girls understanding the game, that sounds like a much better way to approach it. So we're going to come back to you with football. In fact, that's probably how we're going to wrap up the show. But first, we're going to jump back over to David, and we're going to talk about what everyone doesn't want to talk about, which is COVID. Right now, we still have a mask mandate in effect. There are still some COVID guidelines out there. But the big thing that came out recently from the Bessie board, specifically the
Department of Education.
Right. Okay. So it is.
Bessie is distancing itself from this.
Gotcha. Well, there you go, folks. There's a little political commentary for you on a Wednesday morning. So we're, from the Department of Education, specifically Superintendent of all state schools, public schools, which would be Mr. Cade Brumley. Kind of a surprise announcement. I know that both Dr. Cantor from the Department of Health and the governor both not real happy with this announcement, but it, according to Brumley, this is about empowering school districts and parents. So tell us a little bit about what the state said and then what Livingston Parish is doing.
Yes, well, I guess we could just start real fast with what Livingston Parish is doing. They are following what Cade Brumley said, which is now the big issue with quarantine has been for close contacts. It's pretty obvious. Anyone who tests positive, I think everyone's pretty much been in agreement. If you test positive for COVID-19, you should not be at school, whether you're student or employee. I think that one's pretty obvious. The one where it gets tricky is when it's close contacts, which there's a lot of wiggle room around that, whether or not you're close contact, whether or not you were masked at the time, whether or not you're vaccinated. So that's caused a lot of confusion. And if you're going the safe route and just if you're a close contact within 6 feet of someone for at least 15 minutes within a 24-hour period, within someone who's tested positive for COVID-19, then you are considered a close contact and therefore are required to quarantine for a set amount of days. Usually at least 5 if it's the most lenient stipulation. So that has caused a lot of disruption to attendance. A lot of kids are having to miss. Livingston Parish is not unique in that. That's being felt across the state, and that's really what Cade Brumley's message was that this is affecting their learning, and so basically, he is now the close contacts is now as a parent choice option, whereas a parent or guardian, if their kid is identified as a close contact to a positive COVID-19 case, they can decide whether or not they want their kid to stay in school or to quarantine their child. So that is something that up until now has not been in the parent's hand. It's been, basically if you're identified as a close contact, you have to quarantine. Well, now that is being empowered to local school districts to basically implement the parent choice option that he called it. And Livingston Parish Schools is following that guidance from the state superintendent. Now, Livingston Parish has instituted its own parent choice option. So if you are a close contact, or if your child is a close contact, you can choose whether or not you want your kid in school or not. And that's each parish is kind of handling it differently. EBR, I know they're keeping the quarantine guidelines as is because, like you said, Dr. Joe Cantor, the state health officer, and Governor John Bell Edwards, they kind of spoke out against what Dr. Brumley did. They saying that it doesn't follow with the guidance from LDH, the CDC, which recommends that kids be quarantined if they're exposed to COVID-19. So, it's on a parish by parish basis. I know St. Tammany, I believe they said that they are giving the parent choice option to kids. To families. Jefferson Schools, Orleans Parish, they're sticking to how it's been, where kids have to quarantine. So it's really a parish by parish basis, and it's going to cause a lot of confusion for families. I can imagine.
Sure. I mean, it's going to be tough because a lot of people are doing it, differently. So it'll be interesting to see. You can check out David's story in this Thursday's paper. And of course, it's online if you want to read a little more in depth about it. But it is going to change some things for the school year going forward, obviously. And I mean, I'm sure that there will be some leeway in there in case things change again and we end up with another Delta surge or anything like that. Talking about not necessarily staying with schools, but there was sort of a two-parter, and we did discuss it. Is the Bass Pro bonds? We discussed this last week. There is a podcast coming out with the mayor of Denham Springs. We also did a podcast that came out Tuesday with the director of Gravity Drainage District 1. They're going to be getting a lot more money. We discussed that the school system has also noticed an influx in sales tax. So a lot of folks are going to be getting some more money, especially from that Bass Pro development. But first and foremost, let's talk about the fact that you went over the numbers that were sent to us by the school board. As of right now, things are pretty hefty. They're not quite as good as they were last year after COVID started to wane a little bit, I think. But still looking at increases month over month.
Yeah. July started the new fiscal year, and this past July, I'm doing a rough guess on the figures because I do not have them in front of me, but this July I know was better than any month was in the last fiscal year. So it was off to a good start, and even though it has dropped from July to August, and then from August to September dropped, it is still about $3.5 million more than what the sales tax was collected at through this same time last year. So it's looking like it's going to be a good year in terms of sales tax collection, which that funds so many entities across the parish. So I mean, those sales tax dollars are important, to have them because that's what pays for a lot of the public service that gets done in the parish. For example, that's one of the reasons why the Livingston Parish school system was recently able to give a raise to its employees that they should be getting. I believe this week they should be getting a raise on top of a one-time stipend. So that's where a lot of that comes from, because when COVID started, a lot more people were doing shopping online. But even though they're shopping online, those sales tax dollars do stay in Livingston Parish. So they have seen a bump the last couple of years in terms of sales tax.
So, and combined with the Bass Pro deal, going to be interesting to see what some of these taxing entities are able to do with that extra money, especially with those bonds paid off. I know when we talked with Wesley Kennebrew of Gravity Drainage District 1, they're going to be looking to stretch that dollar as long as they can. and go after a lot of larger projects using that as match money for grants. So
Yes.
going to be interesting to see how much improvement there is.
Which is what Mayor Landry told you as well, I
Yep,
believe.
they are going to be trying to use that money in different pots and stretch that dollar as far as they can to do improvements, roads, drainage, all sorts of interesting things in the city limits of Denham Springs. So staying with, well, actually not staying with, we're going to be moving on to the parish council. I was trying to look for a way to connect it, but you know what? We're just going to divide and conquer here.
Transition.
Yes. So getting into the parish council, there's been a lot of, it was a rough year on the river, specifically for tiki tubing. There has been some discussion, and now there will be a public hearing next week, correct?
Yes.
On what's called the river rules. If you're interested in some overview of it, we did have a podcast come out last week. That would be the last full week of September, where we talked with Parish Councilman Tracy Girlinghouse about it. David, you've been keeping up with this process. Tell us what the residents of Livingston Parish, and I guess the visitors as well, can expect from this potential ordinance, which will be discussed a week from Thursday.
Well, yeah, this has been the hot topic, I guess, for the parish council. I mean, that along with zoning and impact fees and a few other issues. But this is a topic that is more can be grasped by the regular person who might not know what zoning and stuff is. But basically, ever since there was dozens of people that had to be rescued this year on the Amy River after launching from tiki tubing. 2 people drowned this year after launching from tiki tubing. So the survivors of one of the victims, his widow and sister, brother, they have really pushed to have more regulations on the Amy River, but the parish council, obviously not wanting to target any particular business, they're feeling this was this was a time to address river safety as a whole. So last week, they officially formally introduced this ordinance that could go into effect, or that they could vote on as soon as October 14th, the same day that the public hearing is. And it's kind of the same stuff that we've talked about. There would be signs along the river, on both sides of the river, kind of, just letting people know a little bit of the history. And then some of those signs would also be they compared to mile markers that you see on the interstate to let people know that, if someone does have an accident, they could call first responders, and then they could say we're at they described it as NA1, NA2, NA3, just to give a more exact location to help first responders reach you faster. They're also, they're still talking about that life vests should be provided by the businesses that offer these activities on the river, and that is a difference from requiring life vests. That's something that they have yet to really. I guess they're not wanting to make it a full-blown requirement that anyone who partakes in these water activities has to wear a life vest. They're still trying to leave that up to the individual person, but they're looking to make it a requirement that is at least provided by the business, so that if anyone wants to have a life vest to feel extra safe, they have that afforded to them. They're also talking about the ordinance would include a safety video, which is something that that's a real sticking point for a lot of them, because they compared it to other recreational activities such as skydiving, whitewater rafting, those sort of things. Those sort of can be dangerous activities. They have to watch a safety video beforehand, and that's something that they're wanting to see more in Livingston Parish at these waterway activity businesses, that they have some sort of safety video that people have to watch before they sign, anything, before payment is accepted. So, I mean, that's kind of a basic breakdown. They have some stipulations for the signing, but that's kind of the breakdown of what would be in this ordinance, if it were approved as was introduced last week. And like I said, that's October 14th. They'll have the public hearing, and then they could vote on it, immediately after that.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. There was a lot of public pressure, especially with them having meetings on Zoom. A lot of people popped in and, had some things to say. So it will be interesting to see how they pull this together. But I know we use tiki tubing a lot. That's kind of what brought the incidents this summer, is what brought this to the forefront. But as we discussed with Parish Councilman Tracy Gerlinghouse in the podcast, this is about the whole river.
Yeah.
We have a lot of pieces of waterway in Livingston Parish that can be used for recreational activity. A lot of businesses make use of that and trying to make sure that people are safe when they get on the river. So we're going to pop back over to Rob to wrap the show up to talk about football, which we have, I believe it's 2 games on Thursday.
2 on Thursday.
And 3 on Friday.
3
So
Friday.
let's start with Thursday.
We've got Springfield is going to open up district play, or actually this is non-district for Springfield. They're actually the only school who does not start district play this week. They've got that smaller district, only 3 games at the end, but they're playing Pearl River, which is always a challenge for, and I think that when I talked to Coach Surpass this week, it was kind of like they get a big win last week against Ben Franklin, but it's like one of those things where he said confidence it can work 2 ways for you. You can look at it and say, okay, we're doing well. But on the flip side, you can also say it can kind of cut you in the fact that you've still got things to work on that show up. And that's where he thinks they are now. He's looking at for some improved play from his offensive line and from his defense. And they're also trying Torius Buggage he's just had a phenomenal season as a sophomore. Had 216 yards rushing last week in that win. He's been unbelievable, and he's turned into one of the leaders. You just kind of you don't want to say expected, but that's just kind of the performances that he's turned in so far. And they'll be going to Pearl River. And Coach Surpass said they're mindful of a couple years ago. I don't know if you guys remember, had a really good back. I think he turned in 5 or 6 touchdowns against them. He said we're well aware, and Pearl River's got a back this year in Brian Jenkins. He's had I think it was over 300 yards earlier this season in one game. So he said we're really mindful of that. They've always it seems like they've always got a really good running back, and they can kind of ground it on you. And so he said they're not looking forward to it, but that's part of the challenge in facing them. He said the defense flows to the ball really well. That's going to be a challenge for him on that side of the ball.
So a challenging game, as you have lined out.
It's just and I mistakenly said it was a district game, but all of these games kind of get them kind of geared up for that district race, which for them it's a whole lot shorter. And you don't want to say they count a little more, but you got to make every one count when you go out when you're only playing 3 district games.
Sure, and it's still I guess North Lake, Pope John Paul, and St. Thomas.
That's correct.
My goodness, 3 private schools on the North Shore, so a difficult district to be sure.
Yes.
What's the other Thursday night game?
Well, we've got Albany hosting Bogalusa, which is Albany's coming off a loss to Riverside. They go up, take a lead, then it gets they come back, tie it, and Riverside got 2 scores really quickly right before halftime. Big plays for them. Albany also lost Seth Gallion, who's their top receiver, broke his collarbone. So literally while I'm talking to Coach Knight after the game, Seth wound up calling in, just to give him an update, on it. And, he kind of chuckled. He said, Seth looks like he might be back healthy for for the end of the season, provided. But if they make the playoffs, maybe he could be in there. But that obviously kind of changes some things. They might be able to do. They've also been without J.J. Doherty, who's still dealing with a shoulder injury. He said they're going to prepare this week like they don't have J.J. He has not been cleared yet, which is what they're waiting on there. So. But they're going to prepare. John Dewey stepped up with Seth out. He caught a touchdown, and he has a lot of faith in what John can do as a receiver there. So, and then with Bogalusa, Coach Knight just said it's a lot of speed on both sides of the ball. So you have to kind of try to offset that. He's also kind of challenged his offensive line to kind of ground and pound a little bit, get down there and maybe block a little better. And he said that's where the challenge is probably going to come from Bogalusa's defense with the speed that they present.
So they're going to have to pull it together without some pieces that they're used to as they enter into district. Right. That's always a tough time to suffer those losses. So that's going to be your 2A and 3A games.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of a clever way to put it.
Yeah, that's it.
But your 2 and 3A games are going to be on Thursday. Your 5A games are on Friday. So let's start with, I believe you're going to Live Oak and Zachary.
I'm going to go Live Oak Zachary. That's correct. Live Oak is coming off a win last week over Douglas. Just it seemed like everything. I think they might have lost a turnover on their first drive, but I think after that everything kind of went their way. So it's just for this one, it's Zachary. You're looking at a team in 5A that's a top 10 team in the state. You guys know when you get to 4 or 5A every week is a big game. It doesn't matter who's playing who. They all carry a lot of weight. And it's all good teams playing each other. But Coach Westmoreland, when I talked to him, he said they're going to have to play as close to a flawless or near perfect game as they can all the way around to compete against Zachary. And it's just one of those games where you have to bring it regardless. But he I said, how are the kids are kind of accepting. He goes, they're focused and they're ready. They know what they have to do. So it should be an interesting game. Yeah. And right now Live Oak is the only parish team that has not lost a game so far.
Oh, so a lot on the line.
So yeah, I mean, when you look at it, and ideally you'd want to say, okay, of course you want to try to win as many games as you can, but this is it's gonna be a really good gauge to see exactly where Live Oak is right now.
So moving south a little bit, let's talk about Walker. What's Walker got going on Friday?
Yeah, Walker's going to be hosting Scotlandville, which is always a good game. I think the big thing when you go back and look at the Walker's game against East Ascension, Walker scores on a lot of big plays, and East Ascension was able to ground out really busted like a 31-yard run on the first play. So they established the ground game really quick. When I talked to Coach Mahaffey this morning, it's finding consistency for them. In terms of being able to establish drives. They scored on big plays last week, and he said just getting that consistency, and it's not so much to get maybe your defense a rest, it's just to get into a rhythm in what you're doing and trying to figure out what you're doing. The challenge here for them is they're going to be, and you can't really say challenge, but they're not going to have Hunter Bethel with them, who left. He didn't play the second half with some to go through some concussion symptoms is what they said what he was showing. So Warren Young is going to start at quarterback. Warren Young Jr., who he came on in the second half. He busted a 95-yard touchdown run. So that dynamic playmaking ability is there for them. And he's got a whole week this time. It's kind of the same thing we were talking about with Denham Springs and their quarterback situation, where you get a week of being able to take reps as the starting quarterback, whereas Warren Young Jr. is mainly playing receiver for him. This week he's getting those reps at quarterback. So we're going to see what happens. Coach Mahaffey seemed, he's got a lot of faith in him and might bring in a little different dynamic to that offense this week.
Last but certainly not least, Denham.
Yes, they'll be going to Central. Yeah, you guys know, and this is it's a double thing where you've got that great rivalry that they've always got, and they're going on the road to play. I'm talking to Coach Beard. He said he loves going on the road, playing in those types of environments, just so his players can experience those things, and what it's like to play in those type of rivalry games. But he said at the same time, they're more focused on what they have to do to get better, And they'll be, he just says that whole team, they run the ball really well, as you well know. Coach Edwards, he tipped his hat to Coach Edwards every time. It seems like every time they play, it's a kind of a, you don't want to say a slugfest, but it kind of turns into a slugfest. I think last year, if I remember right, it was a rainy game. Got a lot of lightning. I think we had a good lightning delay there for a while, and that's kind of on Coach Beard's mind. I know he mentioned it, I think, when we were talking. So it should be a great way to start the district. He said they should be back to 100%. Last week they were missing 4 starters, including 2 on defense. He said that defense should be back at 100% this week.
And of course that sort of the opposite of Albany, pulling it back together for the start of district as opposed to losing some people for the start of district.
Yeah, and Albany's been battling that, the injuries since, it's almost been the entire time between, COVID, stuff and just kids getting hurt. And, Coach Knight's had to juggle he said basically they've got some kids who are playing varsity ball that probably, should be playing JV ball, and
Sure.
he said that goes back to, and Aiden Castile's a sophomore who should be playing probably some JV stuff, and they lost some JV games because of the storm. But he said here he is, kind of learning the game under the bright Friday night lights, trying to, learning the game, the high school game when he was hoping to get him some reps with JV. But that's, that's what happens sometimes. That's you got to make adjustments.
It's part of the game. So let's introduce ourselves real quick. We have run a little bit over than our normal time, so I'm going to start on the viewer's right.
Hey, this is David Gray, lifestyle editor with the Livingston Parish News.
And on the left.
Hey, this is Rob DeArmond, sports editor with the Livingston Parish News.
And my name is McHugh David, publisher and editor of the news. Appreciate you guys joining us today for the Livingston Parish News weekly show. This is group therapy. It's our time to sit down and talk about what's going on in Livingston Parish. Please remember the news is on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. We are once a week in print on Thursdays at $7 a month to get that in your mailbox. We're also online, www.livingstonparishnews.com. We do hope you have a great day, and we will see you next time.